Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the Women in Sports panel discussion. My name is BJ Burgess. I'm the Director of Championships here at the USCAA. And again, I want to thank you for joining us. Just a few things before we get started. I'd like to go over the format of today's discussion. Each of our panelists will be instructed to introduce themselves and give a quick overview of their background in the industry. From that point, we'll move forward into our guided discussion, hitting some of the most relevant topics for women in sports currently going on in the world. And then finally, we'll give you guys an opportunity for some Q&A. I do ask that you hold all of your questions until the end of the discussion. At that time, you'll be able to use the Q&A feature as well as the raise your hand feature. If you'd prefer that we just read the questions to our panelists, please use the Q&A and I'll direct the questions appropriately for you. If you would actually like the opportunity to speak to a panelist, please use the raise your hand feature. At that point, we'll give you access to a microphone so that you can address any of the panelists that you wish. For anyone who is watching the recording of this, you'll also have access to the panelists through me. At the end of the discussion, I'll provide you my email so that you can reach out to me and I'll then guide your questions to the appropriate panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to get things started and allow our panelists to introduce themselves. Trudy, if you don't mind kicking things off for us.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you for having us and putting together this wonderful panel. So I'm also excited to hear everybody's background and learn a few things myself. My name is Trudy Lacy. I am the athletic director at Johnson & Wales University, Charlotte, entering my 5th year with our university. And just have a wonderful group of coaches that I work with and some very dedicated athletes. My background reaches various degrees in the sports world. I started my career as a Division I women's basketball coach. From there, I moved to international basketball and worked with USA Basketball through the 1997 and 2000 Olympics, which was a very exciting time. And after that stint with USA Basketball, I was fortunate enough to work in the WNBA as the head coach and general manager of the Charlotte Sting. That's actually how I ended up in Charlotte, and then went on to spend 4 years with the Washington Mystics as general manager and head coach with them as well. And in addition to that, I have run a consulting firm that focuses on leadership development and life coaching.
Excellent, Trudy. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move on to Jennifer Laney.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Laney. I am the Athletic Director and Director of Student Life at the University of Maine at Augusta. I've been here for 12 years. I started at UMA after graduating from UMaine with a degree in nutrition. I started as the administrative assistant for athletics and then soon got the opportunity to coach women's basketball. And I coached women's basketball for 8 years and was also the assistant athletic director and have now been the athletic director here for the past 5 years. As far as my education, I think that as I've been working here, I've been very interested in the intersectionality between higher education and the collegiate athlete experience. So I had my master's in higher education with a focus on student athlete retention. And I am currently pursuing my doctorate with a special focus to organizational support and organizational culture and how we can better support women coaches.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Stanhard, and I'm the head women's basketball coach at SMCC. If you see me leaving the screen, it's because my 1-month-old baby is sitting right next to me, so our pacifier keeps falling out. But I played basketball for Bowdoin College in Maine, and then took a year off from playing and coached at Emmanuel College in Boston. And then from there, I moved to England, where I played professional basketball for 2 seasons, and also did 2 master's degrees while I was there. So the first one was in sport business, and my dissertation was on women coaching women as a hiring incentive for athletic directors. And then the second one I did was sport law, and I compared Title IX in the US to the Equality Act in England. My now husband, then boyfriend at the time, we got recruited as a package to go play in Denmark. So we played there for a few months, got married there, and then moved back to Southern Maine, where I started coaching at South Portland High School, which was a reference from my old college coach. And then it's also where our current athletic director lives and where SMCC is. It's in South Portland. And so I was there for 2 seasons, and then I'm now starting my 5th season as the head coach at SMCC.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Now we'll move on to Dr. Phillips, if you will.
Hi, my name is Callie Phillips. I am the head volleyball coach and an adjunct professor at Johnson & Wales University in Charlotte. So I get to work with Coach Lacy every day. First, let me say I'm excited and honored to be part of this panel, and I'm excited about what we're doing today and how we're talking and all of that. So just very happy to be here. My coaching career started as a high school coach. My bachelor's degree is in special education, so I was a high school coach and teacher for 14 years. The final 5 of those years, I was the part-time head coach at Johnson & Wales. I was hired in 2009 to start the program here. After 5 years, the position here went full-time. So in the meantime, I got my master's in sports administration. So when that job became full-time, it was going to be mine. I wanted to make sure that I was qualified for it and the best candidate. So I did my thesis on academic support for athletes in my master's program. And then once I started full-time here, I completed a doctoral program, and my dissertation was on sports specialization and why athletes choose just one sport and pursue it year-round instead of the multi-sport athletes that we've seen in the past. So that was a very eye-opening experience, and I'm still a huge advocate for multi-sport athletes, and I could talk your ear off about that for a long time. So, you know, I'm entering my 11th season here at Johnson & Wales Charlotte. I enjoy teaching the sports coaching and athletic administration class here, and I love what I do every day. So, looking forward to talking about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Callie. We'll jump down to Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda Janowski. I'm the athletic director at Villa College. I'm only going into my 2nd year in that role. I've been the head women's soccer coach there for 5 years now as well. My career, college, I played Division I soccer at Canisius College, where I got my bachelor's in phys ed in health education and a master's in sports administration. From there, during my last year, I went into becoming an assistant rec director at a pretty sizable town recreation department in the area. From there, I actually switched over and had an opportunity at a high school that was brand new. So I got to start a high school from ground up, including building their sports from the ground up, which has been great. Going on to having some girls set like world records and like for age group, it's been a really cool opportunity. Right about then I was also playing professional soccer for a few seasons, and then had the opportunity to start coaching college soccer at Villa Maria when we started sports back up. And yeah, kind of switched over to this now. So that's where I'm at.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll round out the group with the last, but certainly not the least, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for having me today. My name is Sarah Renkunis. I'm the coordinator of athletic programs at Penn State Scranton. I've been there for 10 years. I'm going into my 10th fall season right now. My story is a little bit different than everybody else's. Like many of females in sports, I started as a student athlete, When I went to college, I ran club cross country at Penn State. I was a Penn Stater, so I bleed blue and white all the time. And when I was covering things for our student newspaper, I found myself always covering athletes because I had always been in athletics. And so my particular area of study and what I like to do is the media coverage of females in sports and the disparity between the coverage of male and female athletes at the same level. And so in that industry, in photojournalism and journalism, which I also teach some courses and guest lecture some courses in journalism and article writing on our campus. I also write our features and our stories for our website. I created our first interactive website so that we can have stats and scores when I got to Penn State. So it's really important for me as a female who was an athlete and loves sports to be able to correctly represent the female athleticism in the media. And I'm also the head cross country coach. I was made head cross country coach last season. And so I have my team this season is my, I feel like it's my first real team because I, was new last year. So I'm super excited about entering the coach world too. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. As you can see, we have, a panel with a pretty diverse background, touching the professional sports world, the corporate worlds, the collegiate world, on into high school. And so, I think it's important to note that while we're focused on some of the challenges that women face, that there's a lot of good things to be taken away for our men who are in attendance. And so while this, may be focused toward women and some of the challenges, I think there's still a lot of really good takeaways for everyone who's in attendance. So with that being said, I'd like to jump into the discussion portion. Sarah, can you talk a little bit about some of the different opportunities within athletics that there are, for example, in administration, athletic training, coaching? I know you've touched on some of those roles in your background as well.
Okay, so absolutely. Sometimes you don't know it, but you're exactly where you need to be, and you're not even aware of that. So I've always been an athlete. I pulled out my 6th grade yearbook the other day, and me and my mom were looking at it. And while most of the 12-year-olds in my class had wrote like marine biologist or pilot or firefighter, mine was Sarah Renkunis wants to be a professional basketball player with the Chicago Bulls. So I had like some serious hoop dreams when I was younger. I was almost 6 foot tall by the time I was in 6th grade. So when I went into high school, they put me on the basketball team because that's where I was. So I was the tallest girl in our class, and it just became so, second nature for me to always have a game or always be in season. I was a 3-sport athlete. I ran track, cross country, and I played basketball. And I ended up being really good in track and really good in hurdles and went to states, and that kind of ended up being what I wanted to focus on. And then once I graduated high school, I thought, well, I'm not a professional athlete. I'm never going to go into that, realm again. But athletics never left me. So even when I was in my public relations courses and journalism courses, I worked for a student newspaper, and I started looking at all of the assignments that we were getting, and I was always picking the ones that had to do with athletics. I was following the 2007 Penn State women's volleyball team who went to national championships. Like, I was so inspired by all of the collegiate student athletes and found myself really covering them a lot. And I didn't realize at the time, but it became a really big thing for me to be able to cover female athletes instead of in a sexualizing student or female athletes. When I was a kid, my room was covered in basketball players I would cut out of magazines. And there was no females in there because I would need like a Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition to get the female athletes that I wanted to look up to. And, I'm 11, so my parents wouldn't let me go buy the swimsuit edition for Sports Illustrated to get the females that I was looking up to. So it became really important for me as a female athlete in the past and moving forward to use what I had learned to be able to represent female athletes in that way. So when I walked into Penn State and met my athletic director, Jeff Malice, he right away realized that I was pretty good at covering some, sports related stuff, and I could help really get some publicity out there. So even though I wasn't ready to be a coach and I wasn't the best athlete on my high school teams, I was welcomed into this because of my expertise in public relations and because of communications. And there's so many other opportunities that you might not realize that are there. If you like statistics, you can take statistics. I love data. I'm really bad at math. I'll just put that out there. Communications majors aren't the best at math, but we're pretty good at statistics. So it's one of my favorite things to take stats at every game and show data about how student athletes are improving on the court or field, to show data about how female representation among female student athletes and coaches can be different. So there's tons of opportunities in kinesiology. You can be an athletic trainer. And we've had female athletic trainers who have been amazing with our student athletes. They're empathetic, they're comfortable, but they have everything a man can do. So it's not so much that you have to be, the best at your game or, the best student athlete in your college or high school, but to be able to utilize, if you have a love for sports, which I always have, to be able to utilize that in a lot of different aspects. I started out as an administrative assistant when I first graduated. So I was paying bills and like writing short stories, but I made it a point to show everyone that this is what I wanted to do. I took my camera and I went out to every game and I became the unofficial team photographer. And we finally had pictures of all of our students in action, especially the females in action, because you don't get to see that a lot, back then. So I like showing them on the field, getting sweaty, showing them blocking the ball. And, I moved up to the coordinator of athletics after a few years there. And now I got to add head coach to that. And I'm a head coach of both a female and a male cross country team. And I think that's awesome. So if there's anything that you're doing that you think, you really want to be in athletics, but you just weren't the big, athlete star, you didn't have the best time on the track, it doesn't really matter. You can turn your interest into something that could benefit you and athletes in the long run.
Sarah, very well said. Thank you so much. To kind of piggyback that, Jennifer, what are some of the major experience or moments that have impacted your career development?
Yeah, so I would say the largest experience that I had that I can remember that was really a turning point for me was when our basketball team received their first bid to the national tournament. And I took over the program in 2010, and 2 years prior to that, the team had gone 0-21. And so we were really rebuilding. By the time that I got there, we were right around the 500 mark. And so that's where I took over. And we didn't have a deep bench, but we had a really good team bond, and we were really able to develop some really great qualities and build the program. And it was our first ever bid to the national tournament for women's basketball at UMA. And so it was really exciting. And I remember, looking back, really seeing, for me, it was a turning point as a professional, because I had a newfound confidence in myself. And I think that as a young coach, it is difficult to build that confidence and to be sure of yourself and the direction that you're taking the team. And so that for me was a major milestone. And I think too, that experience helped to direct my education as well. So when we went to our coaches meeting at the national tournament, I looked around, and out of both divisions, men, Division I and Division II, and then men's and women's basketball, I was the only female head coach at the meeting. And it was really the first time that I realized that I was part of a minority of women coaches, and that there really wasn't a lot of us there at the time. And so that really pushed me in a direction for my education and helped me to kind of direct my studies, and has something that I've been very passionate about ever since. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I'm working towards a PhD to understand why women coaches leave the profession, and what support systems and structures we can put into place to ensure that women stay where they are and that there continue to be women coaches.
Awesome. Thank you so much. In everybody's introduction, we all talked about making transitions from some of our different roles from being a student athlete. Amanda, since you played professionally and had an opportunity to be in that realm, can you talk a little bit about your transition from being a professional to being a coach and to being now an administrator?
Yeah, that was a pretty, especially the start of that process, was a pretty wild time in my life. I tend to be that person, like you would spot me in a grocery store pretty easily, and this is really how I am in a lot of aspects of my life. I'm the person that grabs the basket and then walks out like shouldering like 3 things of stuff, carrying things in both hands, and it's overflowing, and I should have grabbed the cart. I kind of approach life at times that way and put a lot on my plate. So coming out of college, I had a 5th year from injury. And during that 5th year of my season, I was, doing my master's full time, playing Division I soccer. And I was also, had like 3 of my teammates were my employees because I had 85 employees and was running a recreation department full time. So I went right into working 40-hour weeks and sometimes fitting it into only 3.5 days of work plus training at a Division I level. That summer before was when I first started playing for a semi-professional team. So it really just kind of segued right into hit the ground running, and it was almost better because talk about ripping a Band-Aid off. You didn't have a chance to think about it because it was full steam ahead and do the best you can every single day. And I'm so grateful for that time. Like I couldn't imagine doing it again, but it was amazing. And so then I continued to play professionally for about another year. And that's when it got really tough. It got tough on my family and keeping that balance with the passion that I had within myself to keep pushing in each way, trying to balance that with work and to finally give back to my family. Because at this point I'm 22 and for 20 of those years, probably they've been carting me around to high-end sports events all over the country. So I was starting to feel a little selfish with it. So I had to start finding that balance. Wasn't long after that, I started coaching actually boys varsity soccer. So some of the stuff you're saying, Jen, and you're looking around, you're like, oh my gosh. At one point, I was the only female boys varsity soccer coach in all of New York State. And it was a pretty cool experience to go through with that. And I had amazing guys on my team who were so supportive and respectful. And that really started to where it gave me the confidence to push into even bigger leadership roles. So yeah, that was a big switch. And then going from, because I'm still coaching, but making the switch from being an athlete to coaching and changing where your focus is and where that energy is. You have to be willing to give some part of that up and transition it, because you have to be a selfless coach, and you can't be coaching and going, I want to be out there still doing those drills all the time with them while it's fun to hop in. They need to be the ones in there getting the reps. So you got to change your focus and be willing to give that piece of you back to the game. And that was a hard transition for me, that part. I know I've talked to a lot of my other former teammates and other athletes, and especially as females, they always found the big transition when you lose that family. How do you maintain that family, and how do you refine that balance of working out, using that passion you had to maintain a healthy lifestyle within a work life? And that took me a bit, but eventually I actually rehomed into a vision I had when I was 8 years old. And that helped guide my way, at least to get me over that hump into like a whole new area.
Excellent, thank you. And Amanda touched on, the coaching piece, and all of us here at some point have done some level of coaching. Callie, can you maybe talk about how as a coach you develop your philosophies and how significant your mentors were along the way in developing your coaching philosophy?
Sure. I did want to touch on one thing that Sarah said about being in the right place at the right time. I found myself living across the street from a Johnson & Wales professor, and I had never heard of the school before at all. And it just happened to be that she moved into the house across the street from me, and that took my career in a totally different direction. So sometimes you just have to trust the process and just know that you'll be in the right place at the right time. As far as the philosophy goes, that's one reason that I really enjoy teaching the course that I do, because we talk a lot about your coaching philosophy and your identity as a coach. Early on in your career, yeah, you're gonna base your philosophy on your mentors and the coaches that you've had in the past, because that's what you know. And so, in my first few years of coaching, I mirrored a lot of what my specifically high school coach did. He was a big influence on me. But I did a lot of what he did. I felt like I had to write everything that we did in practice down and fold it on an index card and slip it into the waistband of my shorts, because that's what he did. And I felt like that's what coaches did. As I grew older, my philosophy became based on my own experiences as a coach. I think early on, you base your philosophy on your experiences as a player. As you move forward, you start basing your philosophy on your experiences as a coach. And your philosophy is ever changing. That's, like I said, that's one reason I love teaching that course, because every time I go through that with a new group of students, my philosophy has changed since the last time I taught that course. One of the examples that I do give as I teach that course is, the 2016 season was a very pivotal season for me. I lost my father during that season, and family all of a sudden became a very, very big focus for me. I can remember trying to justify missing a game to stay with my family when my family obviously very much needed me. And I felt a lot of guilt and a lot of pressure to be at a game when obviously where I needed to be was with my family. And that really caused me to reevaluate my philosophy, what was important, how I viewed things. And, now my players will 100% tell you that family is my priority. If a player comes to me and says, hey coach, my dad's been sick, or my aunt is not feeling well, and, I'd really like to go home for the weekend and be with him or her, go, that's where you need to be. There's no question. So that is a huge thing for me, is family comes first. It will always come first. We make time for family. We understand our commitment to our sport, but we also want to make sure that we understand what our priorities are. I can definitely look back on that as a huge turning point for me. Not that family wasn't important before, but it is now absolutely the most important. Along the way, you also get to, experience new mentors. Working for someone like Coach Lacy, we draw upon her experiences all the time. Every time I walk down the hall, it seems like one of us is in her office bending her ear about something. So, you really have to appreciate the people with whom you work and understand that each of them brings something different. Your colleagues can be your mentors too, as you grow in the profession, as long as you're humble enough to accept that feedback and that guidance and that help. It's going to be there if you need it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know we've talked a lot about coaching, but I'm also sure that we have some young people or even coaches now who are looking to make the switch into administration. So Trudy, if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about, what it's like when you're growing a team as an administrator, when you're hiring coaches, and maybe some of the things that you're looking for both students coming out of college who are a young coach, or maybe coaches wanting to transition to administration?
Yes, thank you. My journey to become an athletic director is also a little bit unorthodox. I have to say that was not on my radar. I can totally relate to what Sarah was talking about in terms of wanting to be a professional basketball player, which I had the opportunity to do, and also not to have female role models to look up to as players. I was very fortunate through my career to play for a Hall of Fame coach in KL at NC State, and she very much shaped my philosophy, not only in coaching, but also in life till this day. And my involvement with USA Basketball and having opportunity to work with legends like, Pat Summitt and Gino Ariema, and so many people, Vivian Stringer. And so I think you take those lessons as well as your life experiences, as Callie mentioned, and that begins to help you develop your philosophy and your leadership style. And, very much I see my coaches as my team. I have to say, I'm just so blessed to have such a magnificent group of coaches and staff to work with. And I think one of the keys is that we balance each other. And Callie can attest to this. When I first took over at Johnson & Wales, our big thing was creating culture and deciding who we would be each and every day and how we would show up for each other, while maintaining a very competitive spirit, not against each other, but competitive in supporting one another to be the best that we could be individually, our teams, and collectively as a staff. And so we were able to implement what I call a total development program. I'm a sort of self-proclaimed innovative leader with a lot of perseverance, I guess is a good way to put it. But in order to do that, you have to have buy-in from your staff. And we have that, and it's really helped us be able to elevate our program on the national level, on the field, on the court, but also in the classroom. But for me, most importantly, in developing character, be who you say you are and do what you say you're going to do. So when I look for coaches, I look for people with a very strong work ethic, who live with integrity. And again, as Callie mentioned, of course, we all are in sports. We all are competitive. We all want to win. But at the end of the day, that's not the most important thing. Though I enjoy winning. Don't get me wrong. But it's really about empowering our student athletes and each other to be winners in life. And so character building is one of the key ingredients I look for in coaching, as well as being able to teach the game. I'm very big in, whatever sport it is that you're doing, that you play it the right way. And that is competing for yourself to be the best that you can be, but also supporting the people around you.
Trudy, thank you so much. We've talked to this point a lot about how being a female may have been a disadvantage to us. Katie, can you maybe talk about some of the other obstacles, that professionals face in the field that don't so much have to do with our gender?
Yeah, so I think that what it really comes down to for me, and it's kind of a what came first, the chicken or the egg, like, does gender really have an ingrained influence in these obstacles? But is just the visibility and the confidence to pursue what you want. And I think that anybody that's listening that knows me might giggle at this, but it's great that I have the how do we combat obstacles for women in sports, because I feel like I've been fighting it my whole life. And just a quick story to start. When I was in 4th grade, I played on a boys basketball travel team, and I wasn't allowed to play in a tournament once because I was a girl. And the athletic director that wouldn't let me was also a woman. And so from the age of 9 or 10, I've been watching, like, even my mom just fight for this. I eventually got a handwritten apology letter from the athletic director, but it's something that I've been passionate about my whole life. So it's kind of fueled my fire and my opinions on everything. But I'll go back to visibility. I can second what Jen said on being the only female in a room full of male coaches and having the confidence that you belong there, confidence to apply for new jobs, and not seeing other women in that sphere, I guess. I think that a lot of times as women, we feel like we need to be overqualified before we apply for something, whereas a lot of times, and some of the athletic directors, maybe you agree, you'll look at resumes that you get from men that have zero experience in certain things, but they just know they can do it. And then even if you look at the pedigree of all of us on this call and the passion and dedication that we've put into our education, our training, and our professionalism, and how that's led us to coaching, I think that's unique among women coaches. I also find it a struggle when I'm recruiting. I recruit so many athletes that say I've never had a female coach before. And a lot of times their dads are dropping them off or the ones asking questions. And so a lot of times I feel like I almost have to defend myself when I'm trying to explain our program. I think that I look younger than I am. And so a lot of times I get like, oh, are you a player? Are you an assistant? I'm like, no, I'm the head coach. Or at games, I have the best assistant coach, Pat Haviland, who's been the assistant at SMCC for 17 years. And a lot of times when we're at away games, the referees will go up to him and he's like, no, I'm not the head coach. So there's small battles like that kind of add up over time. Whereas if it's an isolated incident, it doesn't seem like that much. So I think it's the perseverance to just keep going and keep fighting. I remember talking to a colleague who was coaching in the state of Maine, just high school basketball. And it was before I got the SMCC job. And when she retired, she kind of asked me, like, would you be interested in applying? And she was like, I just can't fight anymore. And this position needs somebody to keep fighting. And so I think it's that fight and that fire that we have to constantly have in order to keep being successful. And what kind of sparked my dissertation, which kind of led to all of this, was my coach my freshman year left and we hired a new coach at Bowdoin, and they let the players be involved in the hiring process, which was really empowering for us to ask questions and feel like we were involved. And the final three were 2 women and 1 man. And I couldn't make it to the man's interview. And I was all stressed out that I couldn't be there. And our athletic director looked at me and he was like, I like hiring women to coach women because I feel like they hold each other to a higher standard. And I'd never heard it before coming from my small town in northern Maine, but it really just opened my eyes to the power that we can bring to our student athletes just from having been there before. And so I'm kind of going off on a lot of different tangents and keeping it short, but I think that any kind of obstacle that we now face, while we're not really being excluded just because we're women, like I might have been when I was 10 years old, but a lot of the obstacles we do face are compounded issues of ingrained discrimination in our workforce. And so it's having that in the back of your mind to like keep going and keep being that example to our student athletes and fighting responsibly. So I'm always super cautious with my language in front of my teams for the refs. I might turn around and whisper something, but I make sure that they see me speaking professionally, because you get talked down to a lot in that, or watching your male counterparts swear at the ref and then you roll your eyes and you get a different reaction. So like keeping peace of mind and being able to turn around and look at your bench or look at your players on the floor and have them know that they're watching you, and know that the few women that we might have seen while we were growing up, that we're now that face for the next generation. And that's kind of what keeps me going and how I think we can overcome it. And then lastly, how we overcome it. So I know, BJ, I've gone up to you, Jen, I've gone up to you, and I think we overcome it by like championing each other. So I don't know how many times I've gone up in those sports meetings at nationals and been like, hey, can we do something with women in coaching? And people have been like, oh, I feel like they like get an eye roll every time they see me approaching. I'm like, what am I going to come up with now? But and life has its timing, because when we started these conversations, I think the first email from BJ, I was in the hospital bed just giving birth to my daughter. And I was like, how am I supposed to make all this work? But I've had wonderful support, and especially in Jen Laney, just having her in my conference has been absolutely amazing. I text her weekly just with different questions or concerns. And I think having each other to bounce ideas off of, whether we compete against each other in season, but having discussions like this really helps further the conversation. So I think that's how we overcome it.
Awesome, Katie. Thank you for sharing some of your story. Sarah, I'd like to speak a little bit more generally. You know, we're seeing a lot of more women professionals. Just over the weekend, you know, they highlighted an NFL game where there was some coaches, some office management, as well as an official all taking part in one game. So clearly women are making some moves in the sports world. But what do you think is still the biggest challenge right now? And, you know, as we fight to overcome those, what do you think the next generation is going to face?
Well, to piggyback off what Katie said, to continue the fight. So we have made big strides. I could talk about equal pay among professional athletes, although there's some strides being made in that. I can talk about, you know, equal gym time and what you guys get, you know, in terms of what the men's team gets versus the women's team. But I think the biggest challenge for female athletes is just to be recognized for their athleticism and not just because they're a female playing sport. No matter what role you play as a female in athletics, whether it's an administrator, whether you're on the court or field, whether you're a fan, a daughter, a mother, a friend in the stands, all they want is respect. So I told you I was a stats person, and Katie said, you know, she mostly had males growing up as her coaches. After the institution of Title IX, 90% of female sports head coaches were females. And now 40% of female head coaches for female teams are females. So 51% of females make up the entire population. 40% play collegiate professional, you know, 40% of the collegiate professional or Olympic players are females. But we only get 2 to 4% of the media coverage in respect to that. So I think our biggest fight out there and our biggest challenge is just being respected for our athleticism. I know in 2012, there was the 40-year anniversary of Title IX, and like Sports Illustrated had like the women, you know, women in sports this year, when you would never see that about men in sports this year because that's every day. So just those type of stories, 88% of stories are written by men for men. Only 11% of media coverage is by women about women. So I think this generation and our next generation to continue the fight to be recognized for our athleticism, and that means being good fans and being a good network for them. And what does that look like to be a good network? We have to realize that it has implications in society, and also to be able to go and look at these women's teams, to buy tickets. That it looks like buying tickets for women's games, buying season tickets for women's games, reading legitimate stories about females in sports that concentrate on athleticism instead of sexism, and continuing to be a good network for females in sports so that we can build them up to be more representative in our media, so that we can gain more of a following and that we could be respected for athleticism rather than just females who are playing sports.
Excellent. Very well said, Sarah. I'd like to shift our focus now to a little bit. Amanda, can you talk a little about maybe some advice you were given from either a man or a woman about being a female in the sports industry that maybe gave you that hope to continue the fight, as we've talked about?
Yes. Women, I think, bring naturally a different piece to leadership, whether it's in athletics or not. And a lot of that, I think, not to slight men by any means, but the natural ability to be compassionate and to look at the whole person, not just necessarily the athlete, but beyond the off the field, and really think about the whole picture in a different aspect and with like a different natural feel inside. But to go with that is also, and I know someone else is going to touch on this, finding that balance. The balance between having the confidence to push forward and believe in yourself versus the pushback you're getting from people where you're going, ooh, I'm not so sure. Or like someone, maybe a male that's been around longer, pushes back on something going, whoa, nope, I'm confident in my decision. We're going forward this way. Again, versus being compassionate with someone versus when to push them, how to find that balance between saying yes and having the ability to say no. I don't know about you guys, but as a female, I always feel the need to say yes and take more on when it's okay to say no or to delegate it. It's okay to do that. That's what we're supposed to do as the leaders. We're supposed to find different ways to make things happen the most efficiently and easy way for everybody. In versus listening versus directing the ship at times, you know, you got to listen to everyone and direct it. So yeah, having that, finding the balance in every aspect, and I know someone's going to talk about the home work life. You know, you've got to be humans too. So finding that has been much more calming in this role, because last year, starting in my position this past year was not about balance. I stepped in day one and had to instantly hire 14 staff on the first day. It was like, hey, guess what? You have no schedule. Hire 14 people and let's go. You got 3 weeks. So it's been a much different second year so far, even with everything that's been going on.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. Callie, I'd like to go to you for our young female professionals out there maybe looking to get in the field. What advice would you give them when they're entering a male-dominated profession, whether it be sports or something different? And is it something that you would have told your younger self?
Well, first let me say that since my sport is volleyball, since volleyball is technically a sport that's played by women, you know, I didn't encounter a lot of those obstacles in my journey to coaching, to be honest. Now I did coach basketball very early on in my career, and that was a whole different ballgame. You know, with volleyball though, we have, I'd say in our region here, it's about 50-50 as to be men and women coaches. You know, if I send an email to a school that I've never met the coach before, I don't really have a feeling as to whether it's going to be a man or a woman, because, you know, it's not as, the percentages are not as off that way. So coming from volleyball, it's a little bit different. I will say that I think that hopefully gender is not something that should be considered as far as trying to get into the field and all of that. I mean, the reality of it is that it is part of what we have to deal with, but I would hope in our future that it wouldn't be. I guess my advice would be not to, you know, try not to let that be part of your consideration. Be proud and be confident in who you are and what you bring to the table. You know, try not to compare yourself to the other applicants and things like that, but, you know, be who you are, be genuine. And, you know, as we've talked about before, if it's the right fit, it's the right fit. You know, if you fit in with what, you know, the athletic director is looking for, you'll know it, and the athletic director will know it, and it'll be a good fit. But I think, you know, if you let that gender question be in the back of your mind, you might be doing yourself a disservice. You just have to believe in who you are and what you bring to the table. And if this particular interview doesn't go well, then or doesn't work out, then there will be another one. And, you know, right place, right time, all of those things will fall into place. And, you know, my journey was not quite exactly how I expected it would be, but I wouldn't do anything differently. So I think, you know, hopefully after your journey has begun, you'll be able to look back and say the same thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Callie. I'd like to move on to Katie, and we've had some of our panelists touch on it, and it's definitely something that's important to all of us, is the work-life balance And I think, Katie, you're definitely the best suited at this point to touch on just how you maintain that as a coach and a professional.
Yeah, I mean, I might raise my hand in the Q&A and ask another panelist how they handle this as well, because I could certainly use some pointers. But outside of coaching, I also work at Fidelity Investments, where I'm a planning consultant and do financial planning. And so I'm there 50 hours a week. And then my athletic director has set it up so that I can always have the 6:30 to 8:30 time slot for practice. So I would get into work at 7, I would leave at 5, I would go directly to the gym, I'd be there until 8:30, get home around 9:30. And hopefully no one from Fidelity is on the call, but I'd definitely be watching game film while I was at work, or all my practice plans are on my work computer. Oh, and now my baby's crying. Hold on, just 1 second. You can't plan it. Like, you can't plan it any better. All right. So, and so it was an interesting work-life balance. It was more about focusing on me and my mental health and our marriage and how are we going to spend time together. And now I'm on maternity leave from Fidelity. And in this country, 16 weeks is great. To me, it still seems cruel, but coaching doesn't really have maternity leave. Here I am. This was my idea, and now I'm holding my baby on screen. But I think one of the blessings that I have is my assistant coaches, and they've completely been like, stay at home, we've got this. One is a volunteer assistant, one was a former player, and one I mentioned previously was my assistant coach, Pat Haviland, who's been with the program for 17 years. He works at SNC in advising, and so he does everything academic for all student athletes at SMCC, not just mine. But going back to, I think, what Amanda said, and being able to delegate, and I think the hardest part of that is the guilt that comes with it, because something's got to give. Like, am I going to be guilty for leaving my daughter? Am I going to be guilty for leaving my original 16 daughters that are now like distance learning and trying to figure out how to do all of that? But I think what it comes down to is the trust and vulnerability that you can show amongst your staff and amongst your team. Vulnerability is a huge part of our team culture, and I think that starts with me. I have no issue showing emotion or sharing anything with my players or my staff, and I think that that's helped create a bond, that they trust me, that they trust our assistant coaches. They've been a part of the pregnancy journey with me for the last 2 years. I will share that last season, we did actually have a miscarriage, and I had to miss a game. And my assistant coaches stepped in. Oh, it's okay. My assistant coaches stepped in and took over it. And the next day, I had a desk full of cards from my players. And it's just something that I can't imagine going through without my team. And now this, I can't imagine going through without my team. I constantly send pictures and videos in our team group chat, and they respond, and they watch my stories on Instagram. And then they play really hard for my assistant coaches, and my assistants have that respect for them. So work-life balance for me is ever changing and always learning, and trying to get rid of that guilt that comes with it that I think we have as women. I know I was asked a lot of times, both at Fidelity and with coaching, like, oh, are you gonna come back? And like, my first response is like, well, all the men have kids, so they ask the same question. Like, of course they're coming back, and of course I'm coming back. I just might have a baby in a kangaroo pouch on the floor with soundless headphones or whatever they're called. But yeah, so also really looking forward to if anybody else wants to chime in and have any advice on that. But I think the best thing I can say is that trust that you're doing your best, and trust that the people around you know that you're doing your best, and being honest and open with everybody around you. You don't have to try to do it all. You can admit that you need help. And yeah, just go from there.
Excellent, thank you. And to piggyback, I had the privilege of working with Coach Tim Moore while I was at Penn State Beaver, and he was doing the same thing. So it's not just the women who are taking their kids to practice. I watched both of Tim's young boys grow up in the gym, and it's definitely a different dynamic, and it's really fun to be around. We're coming down to our last couple of discussion topics, so we want to be focusing on the forward. So Trudy, looking back on your career, and you've had quite an extensive one, is there anything that you would have changed or wish that you would have done sooner?
Well, I try to live without regret. So I think every situation prepares you for the next situation. But I think the main thing that was a focal point for me, again, having played for some very powerful women and had very powerful female role models in my life, I think that just propelled me to pursue a career in athletics. And I knew deep down that I didn't want to coach forever. And so when I had the opportunity to work for USCAA basketball, that really positioned me to become a general manager at the professional level. But I will say that and the several people have mentioned it, the fight, I think, continues. And I feel an obligation, as a female, as a Black woman, to be a role model. And now, as an athletic director, I think what Sarah had mentioned, we're in our 47th year of Title IX, but still, athletic directors across the country, less than 10% are female, less than 1% are Black females. And so I think that, for me, instead of looking back, I want to continue to look forward and see how I can continue to be an influencer and an impactor and make a difference, not only just for women, but I think, for men and little boys as well, that it's important that they see women as leaders. And this is the last thing I'll say, but I often said when I was in the WNBA is that one of my best highlights would be when I would go to a game and I would see a little boy wearing a women's jersey. So I knew that that guy was going to grow up with the right mindset.
Awesome, Trudy. Thank you so much. We'll go to our last discussion topic, and this is really for any attendees who are a student athlete looking to make the transition. Jennifer, can you talk about some of the things that, maybe a current athlete should look to do as they prepare to transition to becoming a professional?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll echo something that that Katie mentioned, was that sometimes as women we may feel underqualified for a position. And I think the first thing is to really have confidence. As a student athlete, you are given the skills that you need to be able to have a career in athletics, being a leader of a team, being a captain. I think it's finding ways that within your experience that you have now, that you can showcase your skills and your talent level. I think it's important to find different avenues to be able to gain additional experience, whether that's volunteering, whether that's working with as a youth coach, as you kind of gain those tools that you need to be able to further your coaching career. I think the other thing is networking. It's reaching out to other women. It's reaching out to the people that are on this panel today to help to guide you. I think mentorship is extremely important. I think that all of us would be happy to have folks reach out and be able to provide some advice, some experience. If you need somebody to look at a resume or a cover letter, I think it's being able to really connect with others that are in the field, that have the knowledge and understanding of what athletic directors are looking for. I think those pieces are really important. So don't feel nervous to reach out. There's always people out there that are willing to help and to network and mentor.
Awesome, Jennifer. Thank you. Very well said. I just put a note out into the chat section to everyone. So now is the time. If you have a specific question for any of our panelists or something in general, I encourage you to take the next few minutes to use our Q&A feature or the raise your hand. And we had something come in just now. The question is to Trudy. You know, you've talked a lot about being in the right place at the right time and trusting the process. What do you do when things don't seem to be coming together? And what brought you back to college athletics after being at the professional level?
Well, I often say, I thought my career would project like this, but it's been more like this. So there will be times, not only in your career, but in your life, that things won't go as planned. And so for me, I'm always forward thinking. I have a plan. If that plan doesn't work, like I often, and Callie can attest to this, we're all athletes, so we have to be agile and fluid and being willing to change directions and try different things to get us to where we want to be. And to the second part of that question, why did I come back to college athletics? It was happenstance as well. I had no idea that Johnson & Wales had an athletic department. A friend of mine who had gone to Johnson & Wales to coach, I'd met him years ago. He unfortunately passed away, asked me when I had my consulting company to come and speak to the athletes. And so that's how I ended up at Johnson & Wales. But that's when being prepared and opportunity merge together. That's when success happens. For me, sports is about connection, and it's about helping people become the best version of themselves. So whether I'm doing that at the international level, the professional level, at the college level, underneath that is being able to help and influence people. Sports is just my vehicle to get that done.
Awesome, Trudy. Thank you so much. We do have another question in the Q&A, and it's to any panelist who'd like to take a stab at it. They're asking, what keeps you motivated every day?
I can start. I think for me, it's really important to develop your why, knowing and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And I think as Trudy mentioned, being able to be of support and using athletics as your vehicle to be able to help and guide folks. For me, I have my why written down at home. And so every day when I wake up, I see what my why is, and I'm reminded of what I need to do in that day and to kind of keep on track and stay focused. And so that's something that really helps me stay motivated.
I'll chime in. Trudy talked about being prepared, and so I try to work on my preparation every day, whether it's if and when we'll get to go back to practices, if and when we'll play, if and when, especially now, and Trudy actually has a bulletin board in her office that just says pivot, and we are prepared all the time to have to do that. So that kind of goes back to the previous question as well. But one of the things that keeps me motivated is my student athletes. I try to be a role model for them. I try to be who they need at the time that they need it. And so I try to stay focused on what I can do to help them make sure that they have the best experience that they can. I saw a quote on, I think it was Facebook the other day, that said, "Be the coach that you needed." And I don't think that's a dig at any coach that I've had previously, but I try to be not just a mirror of those coaches, but I try to be the coach that I needed, and try to survey what that is for each of my players. And it's never a perfect process, but that's one of the things that keeps me motivated.
I'd second Callie on that. The student athletes are absolutely my motivation, being able to provide them with the best opportunities to be successful on and off the fields or courts. They got a lot of life going on, and being able to be there and teach them to support one another. All the athletes supporting each other, because you don't know what everyone's dealing with on their home front, and helping them set their life up to be successful. is the biggest thing that they could take away from here and their lessons that they're learning. So giving them that opportunity to feel and put their hard work in and give that environment and a safe environment.
Awesome, Amanda, thank you. I want to jump on to our next topic. We had someone ask about keeping your student athletes motivated during this pandemic when you can't all be together.
I'll jump in, and I'll add not only keeping student athletes motivated, keeping the coachings and keeping your own self up and motivated, because there's a lot going on in the world today. One of the things I started doing for our coaches is I call it Monday motivation, and so I may send them a quote, a story, anything that can give them something to think about, but also help them to mentally prepare for their week. At Johnson & Wales, I had mentioned before, we've come up with some innovative programming that we do for total development. And each of our coaches take on a subject, if you will, and we put on programming that will help continue to develop our athletes, whether it's on the academic side for time management, goal setting. This year we're doing a program on civil engagement. We've done programming on nutrition, mindfulness, well-being, anything that can keep them engaged and to help them to continue to educate themselves so that they can take care of themselves, but also, eventually when they leave us, live that wonderful, magnificent life that we all want.
Awesome, thank you, Trudy. And I'm sure many of us echo that same sentiment, that it's meeting our student athletes where they are and being as supportive as we can be for whatever it is that they're currently facing. I want to keep things moving. We have got several questions in the works. One that came through, this would be for our administrators. What opportunities have you created for female student athletes that are entry-level positions on your coaching staff or within your departments?
I know you said for administrators, but I can jump in here as well. So I was actually very fortunate to play for Adrienne Scheibels. For those of you that don't know, she's still the Bowdoin women's basketball coach and gets a lot of credit for her coaching tree. She actually has 12 former players that are coaching at the collegiate level, and she's only been at Bowdoin for about 10 years. And so it certainly inspired me to try to do the same. And on my staff right now, I have one of my former players. She was a captain my first year on the team, and now she's been with me. This is the start of her third season. And actually she used to live with me and my husband for a little while she was finishing up her bachelor's degree, and we went to her graduation. And one of the other women that was graduating in her group, I actually used to coach when she was in middle school. And one of her statements at graduation was that she wanted to get into coaching. And so my husband was like, go talk to her. And I was like, she's not going to remember me. But I went over and I was like, I don't have any money, but if you want to get into coaching, you can come coach with me. And she got a job in Southern Maine, and she's now entering her second year. And both of these women are fantastic. I also really encourage my current players to coach like AAU or anything at the youth level. And I have 3 or 4 players that do the same. I think when you're coaching and also playing, it makes you a better player. And so I highly encourage my team to do that as well. But would really put anybody on my staff, at least at the volunteer level, that wants to be there for the experience. And I've always had at least 1 or 2 that either have a small stipend or a volunteer just to get their foot in the door. I'd never turn anybody away that wants experience. And I think that that's super important. And my former assistants are now out doing amazing things, have much better resumes than I do, just from starting at SMCC. And so I think it's really, really cool to be able to offer that in the area. And Jen and I are actually a part of a different group that's Maine women's Coaches Association. And we have monthly Zoom calls that is spearheaded by the University of Maine head coach, Amy Vachon. And so we meet once a month to talk about how to get Maine women more involved in coaching. And so I think the more discussions we can have and just opportunities we can present, like whether or not you think somebody else wants to do it, if you offer it, it's up to them to turn it down. And not many people have turned it down, even volunteer positions. And so I think that's been a way we've been successful at SNCC anyways.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Sarah, did I see you reaching to unmute?
Yeah. So on our campus, before I got there, we never really had any interns or anything like that. So we started an internship program within our campus. And for the last couple of years, I've had between IT interns, corporate communications interns, a lot of them have been female, and a lot of them have actually played on our teams. And what that does is helps them get their credit and learn while they're still being able to be a part of the sport. In fact, one of our work studies and interns from about 7 years ago is now my administrative assistant and our head softball coach. So it's not uncommon for you as a student to get involved with your department, with your athletic department on campus, and start to learn about how it works and what you can bring to the table. And you never know where that can take you. I know Marvel is on the call and she'll probably be embarrassed that I'm pointing her out, but you know, she worked in the cafeteria after she graduated. She didn't think, you know, anything was going to go anywhere in sports. She was in my newspaper article writing class and covered sports. I noticed that she was a work study for us. And so when she played softball and our assistant softball coach actually passed away of the flu, it was a terrible time, but she stepped up, and she had been injured the previous year, and she stepped up to be an assistant, volunteer assistant, and then worked her way up to be an administrative assistant. She's been with us for the last 5 years. So through our internship program and just getting to know a little bit more about athletics besides just your sport is a great way to get your foot in the door.
Excellent. Well said, Sarah. Thank you. I do have one more Q&A. It's directed to Jennifer. They're asking, how did you approach entering a historically unsuccessful program?
Sure. I think first and foremost, it's to understand that nothing is going to change completely overnight. And so being able to set some real expectations for the program, creating measurable goals. I think one of the other pieces is having the student athletes actively engaged in creating that culture and in your goal setting process. I think when you have buy-in from the student athletes, that can make all of the difference in the world. I know for us specifically, we had a major program shift when we really started to become a student athlete led team. So being able to find some really wonderful student athletes that took pride in the program and really started to hold everybody on the team accountable from the students' perspective, that was a major shift for us. So I think that, you know, just understand that it's going to take time. It's a process. And it's also important to celebrate the small achievements. So along the way, make sure that you take time to reinforce all of the positives.
Excellent, Jennifer. Thank you so much. We don't have any more questions in the chat or in the Q&A. And in the interest of time, I know we all have busy lives, and many of you are still either working on campus and trying to manage your gym through these crazy times, or have courses that you need to go and teach. I would like to say thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to meet with us today, to have this panel discussion. I'd like to thank our attendees for coming. And as I said, this has been recorded, and it will go out onto our YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow. If anybody does have any questions for our panelists that they didn't get to ask, or who are watching the recording and didn't have the chance to attend live, please email me. My email is bj.burgess@theuscaa.com. You can also find that on our website, and I'd be happy to direct any additional questions you have to any panelists, or if it's something that I can answer myself, I'd be happy to do that as well. You know, I've had the pleasure of of working with most of you in person. Those of you that I haven't, I'm looking forward to it as we hopefully get back to our spring championships later on this year. And I'd like to thank you all for being here. It has been an absolute pleasure. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and wrap up today's discussion. So again, thank you everyone for attending, and take care. Have an awesome rest of your week.